Okay, so I think we have people arriving. Welcome everyone. Good morning and welcome back to the UCD Employability Series, What It Takes. My name is Michelle Power and I am the Global Alumni Relations Coordinator with UCD. In this, the fourth episode of our spring series, we'll take a look at what it takes to get a job overseas. This is a topic I actually know a little bit about myself, having spent 7 years working in Asia, 2 in South Korea and 5 in Singapore. This morning, we will hear from 2 UCD graduates who have extensive experience working abroad. First up is Ause Abdelhaq, who has worked in Nairobi and London. Ause will then be followed by Ciara Gaffney, who is joining us this morning from Sydney, Australia, where she's lived for over 10 years. Ciara is also our global chapter rep in the region, so I think she'll touch on that a little bit later as well. After the presentations, we will have 15 minutes for questions. The Q&A section will be led by Michelle Cohen, who is the Careers Consultant with the UCD Careers Network. So be sure to drop any questions that you have in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. Finally, this session is being recorded, so if you want to rewatch or if you have any connection issues, you can find it on our YouTube channel from tomorrow. So that's it for me. I'll hand you over to Ause.
Hello, I hope you can all see me, and I hope you can all see my screen when I share it just now. It's great to be here. Thank you for coming to the webinar. My name is Ause Abdelhaq, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of a brief overview about my experience coming out of UCD, how I got jobs before UCD, and how I've gotten jobs abroad since. So without further ado, I'll start as long as everyone can see me. This is just a little bit about my story. When I was 16, I've decided here to touch on all the major, I suppose, jobs or experiences abroad that I've ever had. So when I was 16, in 2011, I went to India with the Hope Foundation, and that kind of kicked off my interest in working abroad. And I followed it up with another volunteers mission to Haiti in 2014. And I then went on to university. I got a degree in law with social justice, pretty much inspired by those 2 missions. And then as soon as I finished with UCD, I graduated and I moved to Abu Dhabi because I didn't know what I was going to do. And my parents are in Abu Dhabi, so I moved to Abu Dhabi and I joined an a cappella choir, which was an interesting experience. And I stayed there for a few months before I was employed by the UN. And I initially moved out to Somalia and then spent a lot of time traveling between Somalia and Kenya for the best part of 3 years. That lasted until there was, I don't know if people have heard of it, but there was a little bit of a pandemic. And so I tried to get home, but I only got as far as the UK, which is where I am now. And I've been employed here in London by Penguin Books since January of this year. So that's just a little bit of an overview of kind of the path that I've taken and all the abroad experiences that I've had. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, in this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about the benefits of moving abroad, some of the challenges that you might face, some of the sources for where you might get a job abroad, and we'll just go through them one by one. So the first is the benefits, and you can see them there. There's many benefits, more than I've listed here, to moving abroad, but I've just listed kind of maybe the major ones that occurred to me. I think the biggest one is definitely to challenge yourself, because moving away from home, it forces you to grow as a person. Now that can also be, inside your home country, but especially when you go abroad, challenging yourself to grow as a person and learn to take responsibility for your own successes or your failures in a culture that you are not familiar with. It can really build your own confidence. It can build your ability to deal with difficult situations. So I suppose the challenge is the biggest one. But also you can experience a different culture, so see how others live and realize that the world is a much bigger place than wherever you grew up. That can teach you a lot of lessons. It can change you as a person fundamentally, because your beliefs and what you grew up thinking can completely, totally change, at the drop of a hat. I remember when I went to India, the first thing that I noticed was, oh my God, this looks like an Oxfam advert. And I know that's really bad, but visiting the slums, I was like, oh, this is a real place. This is really happening. And that really changed my life. And I mean, on the other side of that, I suppose you can see the world, because there's some really pretty places out there. Like, you know, I never knew that Kenya was so beautiful until I went. And the background photo there is actually, you know, me climbing Mount Kenya, and it's just some of the most breathtaking places you'll get to see if you travel and move abroad. Career-wise, it's also really good, because it's immensely impressive to any employer to see that you spent time abroad, survived, and you know, even possibly thrived. It's a marker of someone who has challenged themselves, like I said earlier, and actually succeeded. So it is very impressive even when you come home. You also meet new people, so you get a network of friends and colleagues from across the globe, and you'll treasure some of them forever, like I do. And finally, there's more opportunities abroad. So, you know, there's bigger, faster, and more diverse markets for whatever sector you're in. Possibly, you know, it's easier for you to get a job in a bigger market. And so there's opportunities that you wouldn't even dream of. And so if you do decide to go abroad, there's a few questions you should ask yourself before you start to plan. So the first two, I suppose, what do you want to achieve and where do you want to go? They're kind of contrasting questions, because it is one of two ways that you can think about it. So you can either think about what you want to achieve rather than where you want to go. And the thing is about that is that there's opportunities everywhere, but you're better off, if you're answering this question, finding something that you actually want to do and letting that guide you to where you go, rather than the opposite, and ending up somewhere that you know you don't really want to be doing the thing you're doing, but just because you wanted to be in a certain place. Now, obviously, the opposite of that is, where do you want to go? Some people don't really mind what they work as long as they get to see a certain part of the world, or as long as they get to experience a certain culture, and that's also perfectly legitimate. So you want to think about it from both sides. For me, it was definitely about what I wanted to achieve. I really didn't mind where I ended up, and that's kind of how I ended up in Somalia, because it wouldn't have been my country like Papua New Guinea or the Democratic Republic of the Congo. No one's gonna, you know, call you, I don't know, a racist or a bigot or anything, and for crossing it off your list. Like, there are certain facts, you know, that just exist. You should never generalize. Never generalize. I mean, always do your research about the country, but it is advisable to rule out certain places. You know, if you know that it's not going to be safe, or actually, on that note, if it's not going to be enjoyable, like if you know that there's a certain culture that you're just not going to fit into, then I think it's better to just cross those off the list before you even try, because and coming to the final question, you are going to have a lot of options, especially if you have an Irish or European passport. You should know where it's easy to go. So places that allow Irish and European people in visa free include like most of Europe, parts of Africa and Asia, and Canada, for example. And these countries, like, there's lots of countries that will let you in for 3 months without a job, 4 months without a job. I think Canada, you can stay there for up to a year without a job. So it's a huge advantage. And it's something, one of the things I noticed when I moved abroad is having a European passport is unbelievably powerful. And it really does allow you to go out and see the world and do whatever you want, really, which is a restriction, which is, I suppose, a non-restriction. It would be something that restricts most people in the world, is their passport doesn't allow them to go abroad and doesn't allow them to seek opportunities elsewhere. So do know your sort of rights as a passport holder, and where is it easy to go. Somewhere with an embedded community that you know of is sure to be easier. So if you're Irish, somewhere with an embedded Irish community, like, I don't know, Abu Dhabi or somewhere like that's sure to be easier than somewhere where people maybe haven't even heard of Ireland, you know, or there's no Irish people around. And it can be good because not only, like, if there's a big community there, it can be good because if you don't like your job, or if you want to switch your job, or if you want to build a life in the country that you move to, and the Irish community is well, for me in Nairobi, it was very powerful, and it was very good at getting you to the next step that you wanted to go to. So you've planned. Now, where do you go to actually get to go? There's loads and loads of ways. These are just some of the ways that I you know, off the top of my head, I thought of, you know, as sources for jobs abroad. If you're an about to graduate or a recent graduate, the graduate programs are very useful. I mean, just thinking back to when I graduated 4 years ago, there was numerous corporations which had opportunities to work abroad embedded in their grad scheme. So it was, I think, Jameson, Aer Lingus, Little, like this is literally just off the top of my head. I can think of loads. So you can approach them at job fairs online or at career seminars. And they want you to experience working abroad because they want you to have that challenge. The one that I took advantage of was the government initiative. So I went out to the UN on the back of the Irish aid program to embed Irish volunteers into the UN system. Now it was called UN Volunteers, but it wasn't actually. It was a paid opportunity. But there's loads of programs, not just UN volunteers, especially for those who are interested in diplomacy or international relations. So you can become a third secretary, and then within a couple of years you'll probably be put on placement to become a diplomat eventually. So the government will send you abroad as long as you're working for them. So it's worth looking on publicjobs.ie and kind of getting in touch with maybe the government and trying to find opportunities. Of course, as I started, I volunteered abroad. So there's thousands of organizations covering everything from war to famine to feminism to early childhood development. So there's loads and loads of opportunities to volunteer abroad, and they need your help and they need your expertise. But the thing is, with that, just make sure you do your research properly. So make sure that you're not engaging in voluntourism. So make sure that you're really required and that the job is a substantial one, and that you're not taking away from a local person who could be doing the job and making money and contributing to the local economy. So that's a really good way in, I suppose, as is remote work. So starting to work before you go. So especially in the pandemic times, connecting with a company that you, or an organization that you admire, offering to help can lead to opportunities down the road. And there's a lot of online volunteering. I know it's run through the UN, but it's also worth just reaching out and just seeing if people need help, especially if you have a particular organization that you want to work for. Kind of stick your nose in and make sure they know who you are and make sure you're there. And then the next one is teaching English through a foreign language, or TEFL. I know a lot of people will have heard of this. There's dozens of different programs across Asia, which are placing English speakers as teachers. It's a really good way. Like, that's a really good way to pick a place. Like, if you have a place you'd want to go, if you want to live in Thailand, that's a really, really good way to find a job out there. And also, I know a lot of people who've gone out there, started teaching English, and then built a life because they've fallen in love with the culture. So it's really good, especially for a young person who's kind of a little bit lost and doesn't know what to do. It can open you up to a whole world experience. And then by far the biggest source is word of mouth. So I'll get onto this a little bit later, but what have other people done and how have they left, and what are they saying? And that's, I heard about UN volunteers 3 years before I ever applied, because some guy who was a couple of years ahead of me in university, we were both in Dramsoc in UCD, and he had gone and he graduated and he'd gone away with UN volunteers, and I met him at an alumni event, and he was just like, oh yeah, you should try this. And as you'll see, I forgot about it, but I came back to it and I knew what it was. I'm just going to move on and kind of give you some pragmatic tips. These are things you might have heard already, but these are for finding a job anywhere, but also for finding a job abroad. And the first one is upskilling. So this is really, really important, and probably maybe the most important. I'm not going to say that they're all important, but this is really, really important. Always be looking for new experiences. Like, always be looking to try something new and develop new skills, because the broader your skill set, the more likely you are to fit into a job that you want. So if you think of it like a restaurant menu, by upskilling, you're adding more and more dishes to the menu and appealing to more and more potential customers, or in your case, potential employers. And that diversity is more than just a buzzword. What I'm saying there is your skills can range from learning a language to event organization to archery. It doesn't really matter. Don't worry too much about what you're learning. It's more about making sure that you're always learning something, always be improving. Because sometimes the most random skills can be the most useful. I got a job in marketing, and you'll see later on, I have a very funny image to share, because I served as a PRO for a society in UCD, a job which I only did because no one else wanted to. So, and I ended up getting a job out of that because it was just a random skill that I happened to have, and then I ended up using on my CV to get this job. So I think focusing on the skills you enjoy is for 20 and 30. There's really, I just wanted to make a point that you should appreciate it. That's not to put you under pressure, but sort of just appreciate that you have access to UCD Careers Network. You have access to people who come before you. You have a big a big source of information there. And that leads me on to your personal network, the people around you. You know, there's a reason it's easier to follow in your parents' footsteps than it is to branch out into a new career. Keep an ear out, learn from others who have gone abroad, people who are a couple of years ahead of you in your course, or maybe those people who went to school with you and went a different way. Just keep an ear out and find the information, find where to apply. Social media is also really good. Reach out to Facebook, LinkedIn, or even Reddit if you have no one in your life. If you just don't have a personal network. Before working at Penguin, I didn't know anything about the publishing industry, so I posted on Reddit, on the publishing subreddit, and I asked them for tips very publicly about how to make inroads into the industry. And don't be afraid. So I'll talk about this more towards the end, but this isn't a time to be cautious or shy. If you need to call that person and get the information, call them directly and annoy them if you have to. Like, it's not a time to regret, you know, not trying something. And the last tip is persistence. So just apply, apply, and apply again. And you might have heard this, and it might feel like when you've been applying for a while that the whole world has like an issue with the personal makeup of your character, and no one will ever value you or give you an opportunity to make something of yourself. We've all felt this way at one point or another, and it's so imperative that you plow on. Look for somewhere that does it all. By this, I mean, you know, rather than going through Indeed or Monster, you can probably find a website that's more specifically aligned to the sector you'd like to work in, and that's true for jobs abroad as well. But more common are sort of newsletters, whereby job opportunities are collected and curated in one convenient place and sent to your inbox. So look for those almost shortcuts, but keep applying, be persistent, and don't let your confidence shake. So again, I'll talk about this in just a little bit, but it's important not to take rejection personally. So you found yourself a job, what you do. Pre-departure, a few tips if you're going abroad. Make sure you're prepared for a major culture shock. It's 100% going to happen to you. It can be scary and anxiety inducing, but if you prepare yourself beforehand, you can actually get better. You can get along better when you're going through it. Get yourself vaccinated. It's amazing how many people forget it, but like places like the Tropical Medical Bureau in Dublin, they'll be able to give you all the information you need. Try to find accommodation before you go, but book a hotel for the first 3 nights. I mean, it's important enough to put in the slide, specifically book a hotel for the first 3 nights, because Facebook expat groups are far and away the best way to go about this. But you can use Airbnb and a host of other websites. But even if you think you found the perfect apartment, it's best to find a hotel first and check out the place in person once you're there, because you could just be duped. You'll also have a better sense of geography in the city, so you might end up choosing a place that's closer to work, for example. And finally, prepare yourself to let go of home. Don't be constantly concerned about those who are at home, what they'll see of you or what they'll think of you. I mean, social media will exist when you're back home, and it'll be just as intolerable. So don't miss a real experience because you're trying to get the perfect shot or video so that, you know, Sally at home will be well gelled, that you're making the most of your life. Like, actually make the most of your life and see where that gets you. Again, some common problems that you might face. Homesickness is the most common of all problems. No matter where you go, there will be a period where you'll miss the home comforts. It's as true for San Sebastian as it is for San Francisco. It's not about where you're at, but the fact that it's not home. Social isolation. We all have webs that connect us at home, even if we go to college with nobody that we know. Like, somebody, we will know somebody. And this isn't true when you move abroad, and it takes a lot of effort to make a secure, close group of friends. So prepare to be lonely, and it's okay. You might face some self-doubt. You might be like, am I in the right place? Was this a mistake? Am I missing out on something else? Or is my life not moving fast enough? Your life is a journey, and it's okay to feel self-doubt that sometimes, but don't try not to compare yourself to other people, and live your journey as it plays out. So you might run into unexpected problems, like, you know, culturally, especially, like, and the cultural misconceptions as well. When I was in Kenya, I ended up, in order not to offend my friend's family, I had to, you know, drink the blood of a goat at like a roast. And it was just awful. It was terrible, but it was completely unexpected. And yeah, I had to get through it. So just be ready for that kind of thing as well. Oh yeah, the next 4 slides are sort of just life lessons that I've learned that I want to run through very, very quickly because I know that I'm running out of time. So the first is always raise your hand. So when I was 15, I think I have a photo. This is me at 15. Yeah, it was very embarrassing. I was shy and I was introverted and I was rarely going out. And when I was going into transition year, my brother gave me a piece of advice, and he said, just put your hand up for everything. And it just wasn't who I was. But raising my hand led to a series of experiences that I wouldn't trade for the world, including my trip to India. I ended up raising my hand all the way to India, where I took that volunteer trip that changed my life. And the thing about raising your hand is you can't be included in the conversation if you never speak. So, and you don't know what opportunities will come if you just put your hand up. I go back to that story about the PRO. I volunteered because no one else would do it. I didn't know that it would lead to a job in marketing in the end. So my second lesson is keep an eye out for opportunities. Post-college, I didn't know what to do. I was in Abu Dhabi. I ended up seeing an ad on Facebook, one of those crappy little sidebar ads that they used to run, and it was like, do you want to work for the UN? And then I ended up in a bunker in Somalia a few months later. And you find opportunities everywhere, and it needs to, you don't have to take every opportunity you spot. I mean, like, look at the millions of tech startups that never were, but training yourself to always ask questions and always look out for opportunities, it will lead you to become a more useful human, not just a potential employee. And this needs to extend beyond employment. It needs to be like a lifestyle choice. I ended up commentating on the European Indoor Lacrosse Championships because I was there because I had gotten a job as a PRO because I put my hand up. And I noticed that the commentator for the championships was doing a bad job. So I decided to put myself in, and I just asked if I could commentate, and I commentated all the way to the final. And I still work as a commentator for lacrosse now. And every couple of summers I get to go away and I get to do this amazing thing. So always look for opportunities is the key. The third one is to kill with confidence. Through blind, unsubstantiated, and almost obnoxious levels of confidence, you can achieve anything in this world. So simply by putting yourself in the mindset of I'm the best, I'm special, you'll open yourself up to opportunities that you never even dreamed of. Because if there's ever been anything you've looked at and you've been like, oh, that's not for me, I couldn't possibly do that, and it's fear related or it's confidence related, think to yourself, well, what if I could? What version of me would it take in order to do that? And then pretend like you're that person until you actually are that person. And it's stupid and it's silly and it's almost childlike. It's make believe, but it really does work. You can do anything because you're awesome. I don't know how many people are in this, but all of you are awesome. And other people will believe it because if you're living it, it's likely that they're struggling with confidence issues themselves, and they're impressed by your strong character. So like, even if it's made up. So basically fake it until you make it. And if you're struggling to get into the confident mindset, try to think back on all the things that you've achieved and reflect on how that person never thought that they'd achieve those things and they never thought that they were all that. And if you can't think of anything you've achieved, call your mom. And if you can't call your mom, call me. Because your friends and your family can see, our achievements in ways that we'll never be able to. And we need confidence to be persistent, as I was saying earlier. Otherwise, the world will consistently try to break you, and you cannot let it. And that's especially true when you're far from home. The last, this is me. This is the PRO job. Sorry, this is the funny photo. I'm going to move on, but this is me at my most confident, and I got the marketing job off basically a video that was related to this, which is ridiculous for a professional sort of application. But anyway, my last thing that I want to say is the most important. There's no sarcasm here, no jokes. Everything is figure outable. This is the most important thing. I'm a mentor with UCD as well, with the alumni, and the most important thing I say to any of my mentees is everything is figure outable. So when I first got a job at the UN, they needed a graphic designer, and I'd never touched graphic design in my life. I completely blabbed my way through the interview, and then they needed an assessment. And so I spent 2 days locked in my room on YouTube learning how to use Adobe. And then I did a test, and then I got the job, and I just completely blagged my way, completely chancing my arm into a job as a graphic designer, because everything is figure outable. So this is like closely tied to confidence. No matter what obstacle is placed in front of you, you can and you will get through it. And you need to believe that. And the reason you can believe that is because don't think of yourself as so unique that you're actually stupid. Like, most people have dealt with most problems, and use that fact to reassure yourself that you'll be able to deal with whatever problem it is too. Okay, maybe you don't know the solution right now, but you know that there's other humans who have dealt with it and gotten through it. And so that you will too. You will figure something out. And it doesn't always mean the solution is happy or pleasant. And sometimes it can take a lot of work. And that work can be exacerbated by your gender or your race or your sexuality in some cases, as we know. But there is a solution, because you're not the first human to face whatever problem it is, and you won't be the last. So just believe that you can get through it, and you will. If there's one thing you remember, from this seminar, it's that everything is figure outable, and it's an incredibly useful thing to bring with you into any aspect of life, but especially for getting a job abroad, because you're going to face problems that you didn't anticipate. You're going to face challenges that you didn't anticipate, and you have to know that you will find a way through them because other people have too. And so that is it. Thank you very much for listening to me. That's my details. Anyone can get in touch with me. I'm always happy to mentor people or answer any questions. And I hope you enjoyed. Hang on, I'm going to try and turn off my video. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. I'm going to introduce Ciara now. And I'm going to hand over to her if I can figure out how to get back into Zoom. Bear with me. Stop share. Okay. Ciara?
Hi, Ause. That was just amazing. I've learned so much from listening to your presentation, so thank you very much. Hi, everyone. I'm Ciara Gaffney. So I actually studied law at UCC initially, and then I went to UCD and studied a master's in commercial law. I always loved traveling. So during uni, I actually spent 2 summers on J1s in America. And I actually wanted to go traveling straight after my uni degree, but somebody advised me to actually qualify as a solicitor first. So I did the FE1s between my degree and the master's, and then I studied at Maples and Calder and qualified as a solicitor in 2008, and the very next day I went traveling to South America. So today I'm really going to focus on 3 key things and 3 values that have really helped me throughout my career. And one has been developing and leveraging my network, and I continuously do that almost on a weekly basis. Saying yes to every opportunity that's been right for me. Sometimes I didn't even realize it at the time. And then being confident in my abilities and also accepting rejections. So in this session, I'm going to talk about why I chose Australia over other countries, preparing to leave Ireland, arriving in Australia, networking in Australia, and next steps. And so when I refer to Australia, it's just because that's been my experience, but a lot of this would apply to a number of other countries that you may go to. So even though I'll refer to Sydney in Australia quite a lot, just apply to whatever country you're thinking of moving to. So first of all, in relation to why I chose Australia, so for me, it was really important to choose somewhere both in terms of my values, my interests, and my career. So in terms of my interests, I do lots of ocean swimming, and I've done ocean lifesaving in Ireland, and I wanted to move somewhere by the beach. And then in terms of work as a lawyer, I wanted to work in a common law jurisdiction. And then I also did some research in terms of what I would need to do to qualify in each of these countries. So in terms of each of those factors, the 2 countries I came up with were the Cayman Islands and Australia. And through research of the Cayman Islands, I realized you have to have 2 years post-qualification experience to go there. So therefore I chose Australia because I was able to get a working holiday visa easily. My lawyer qualifications would be accepted here, and I could live by the beach. So I think it's really important to actually, think about lifestyle, think about career, and think about what's important to you. Whether it's earning a heap of money for a couple of years, or whether it's getting experience in a large financial center like London, whatever's important to you at that particular time in your career. So I think it's good just to actually take the time out, spend time researching, and spend time actually speaking to people who've been to various different countries. And in terms of preparing to leave Ireland, this is an area where I actually didn't spend much time preparing. And if I were to go back and do it again, I would actually spend a lot more time at this point. So at the end of the session, I'll talk about that more in next steps in terms of what I would recommend doing. But when I left, some people advised, in addition to waiting until I qualified, some people suggested waiting until I had 2 years post-qualification experience. And I actually spoke to a recruiter who recruited for Australian companies who told me that. But I just really wanted to travel. So I didn't listen to that. But in hindsight, I think that may have been more helpful. It didn't stop me from getting a role, but I think that was good advice. If you can get experience, whether paid or non-paid, prior to actually moving jurisdiction. And it was also helpful to reach out to recruiters to understand what the landscape was like in Australia. I also reached out to the law societies in both Ireland and Australia, which whatever area you're working in, it could be helpful to reach out to the governing body in Ireland and whatever country you're going to determine whether your qualifications will be relevant and accepted in that country and what you need to do to re-qualify. And then, of course, looking into the visa situation as well. And so in terms of arriving in Australia, so when I left Ireland, I made the decision to leave at the beginning of 2008. And so that was well before the recession. And I may have done things differently had I known what was going to happen. But so I left the day after I qualified, went to South America, traveled around South America, Southeast Asia, went scuba diving. 4.5 months later, arrived in Australia, and the recession, there was a recession. So much happened in that period, like Bear Stearns and all the other things that happened during that period. And in Australia, they refer to it as the global financial crisis because there wasn't actually a recession in Australia. But even though there wasn't a recession, still all of the law firms were on hire freezes when I arrived, and nobody was actually hiring. And another thing that I didn't realize before coming here, which additional research would have helped with, is that in Australia, it's their summer holidays and Christmas period. So it's very, very difficult to land a role between November and February. So it's important to actually speak to people in the country that you're going to determine timing as well. We chose that time because it was summer for lifestyle reasons, but if I were to choose it for career reasons, I would look at it differently. So when I arrived, I quickly found out that I wasn't going to be able to get a role as a lawyer. And so I did want to stay in Australia. So I decided to lower my expectations and apply for roles that I wouldn't have even dreamt of applying after qualifying. So I applied for 200 random roles that didn't even require my experience. And then finally landed a 2.5-month contract role it was like an admin role which didn't even require a degree in an insurance company. But the reason I took it was because I was going to use that opportunity to network and meet people. And my plan was within 2.5 months, I would have another role. And that's what happened. So from day one in that role, I spent every day talking to people, every day telling people what my goal was, being very open about the fact that I wanted to get a role in a law firm. I made contact with the head of legal and people throughout that whole organization. And quickly, they all started connecting me with people, and I started meeting people for coffees. I was meeting new people for coffees almost every day during that period. And then one day, I was just making a cup of tea, and I was chatting to somebody in the kitchen in the office who I told that I was looking for a job in a law firm. And he took me to his office, which overlooked Sydney Harbour Bridge. Turns out that he was the CEO. I didn't actually realize that. I think he'd been on annual leave, so I didn't know what he looked like. So prior to that, he had been the managing director of an international law firm. So he connected me with a partner at the law firm. And then I went and had a coffee with that partner at their offices. He was on a hire freeze, but at the time, I had actually torn my Achilles, so I was wearing a boot. And he told me about kayaking, and we started talking about our interests. So he and a group of people from the law firm used to go kayaking every week. So when I got back to the office, I sent a message thanking him, which is always so important. He then sent me a message inviting me to this weekly kayaking. I lived on the other side of the city. I had to get up at 4:30 in the morning and get 2 trains, maybe even 3, a bus and 2 trains to get to the kayaking. But after 6 weeks, he actually and another partner at his law firm both asked me to set up a company for them. So I knew actually nothing about setting up companies, but I said yes. I had to prepare a business plan. I spent the whole weekend reading 3 books on how to draft a business plan and speaking to everybody I knew in finance, in accounting, in sales, in marketing, and just did it. And so I said yes to that opportunity, even though I didn't think I could do it, but they believed in me. So I think it's really important. So in that scenario, the 3 themes were really important: networking, developing relationships, saying yes to the opportunity, being confident, and not letting it get personal in relation to the 200 rejections that I got at the beginning. And so then after arriving in Australia, so I worked in that role, and then following that worked in one of the top law firms. So in terms of ongoing networking, so in Australia and like in many other countries, there'll be various different societies in your profession, but also Irish societies. So I joined the Lansdowne Club, the UCD Alumni, the Ireland Funds Australia, the Irish Australian Chamber of Commerce, Women in Superannuation, because that's the industry that I'm now working in, the Fund Executives Association, and also life saving, because that's just something I really enjoy. And through each of those areas, I've really built up a really strong network. So through the UCD Alumni, there was an event in Australia, in Sydney, a couple of years ago, and I offered to be a chapter lead, and that's how I got to know Michelle and Camille, and that's been a really, really fantastic opportunity for me here. We organise panel events and drinks events, and I've met so many people through that. I've met people, one girl who's one of my best friends out here, others who I meet for coffee occasionally, another who I play golf with. So it's actually been really great just developing those connections and also keeping the connection back with Dublin, because it is great living in Australia, but it's also important not to lose those connections while you're away. And prior to COVID, I would have gone home twice or at least once a year. And so if I were to go back again, I would actually, at the outset, when you're preparing to go to a new country, actually reach out to those bodies in the relevant country that you're going to. So Enterprise Ireland, the Ireland Funds, the Irish Australian Chamber, UCD, are all across so many countries across the world. And you can reach out to them and ask people for advice, join them before you arrive, and just build up and join their online networks before actually arriving. And the same with industry bodies, like for me, it would be Women in Super. And then when you arrive in whatever country you're going to, joining whatever clubs you're interested in, whether that's GAA or life saving or whatever actually interests you, because not only will just really make the experience happy for you with these really strong connections, but they may also help with your career opportunities. So in terms of next steps, I would recommend, and something again that I didn't do when I moved, and also maybe because LinkedIn wasn't around back then, I would, number one, reach out to associations, both in Ireland and Australia. So for example, associations in Ireland, I know for Australia, there's an Irish Australian Association. So I sometimes go to their events in Dublin so that I also stay connected with the Dublin network. However, if you're thinking of moving to another country, look at what associations that country has in Ireland that you can join now. Look at the industry bodies that you can join at home and abroad, and also the associations where you're going to, which we just looked at previously. I would actually, after this session, write down some of your contacts who have come back from the country that you're going to, or are already in the country that you're going to, and actually make a list of what contacts you're actually going to reach out to each week. And what I found is that, and I've read somewhere, is that you underestimate what you can do you overestimate what you can do in the short term, underestimate what you can do in the long term. So if you even set a target of reaching out to 5 people per week over a 2-month period, it's unbelievable how many people who will actually be happy to speak to you. And so if you reach out to them and ask them just to have a discussion or give you advice about the landscape and in that particular country, most people are more than happy to do that. And I often get requests on LinkedIn, and I just call whoever's messaged me, even if I haven't, if I don't know them, and have that short chat. So I think it's really important. People won't always message back, but a lot of the time they will, and it's worth it for the people who will message back. I'd also look at target companies and look at your LinkedIn connections and see who can make introductions. And I'd also speak to as many people through other means as well, whether through family or UCD or through your connections who you went to uni with. And yeah, just spend that time before you go just becoming really clear about the country that you're going to, and making as many connections as you can. So now I'm just going to pass you to Michelle Cohen.
Great, thanks so much, Ciara, and as your stories and the way you both took us through your journeys, really, really interesting. So I can see lots of lovely compliments and questions popping up. So Ause, maybe I'll come to you first. There's a question. I suppose someone is curious, just having listened to your story. Have you found a place now that you'd like to land for a while, or are you still thinking of moving abroad or making a change?
I think there's one more move in me. When I was very young, I decided that I would like to settle in Canada, and my sister is over there already. So I mean, personally, it just happens to be that I will probably end up there. I didn't intend to be in the UK for much longer than a couple of weeks. But because of the pandemic, I ended up finding a wonderful job with Penguin, and I'm really, really happy right now. But I think once I suppose get married and decide to settle down properly, that'll probably be in Canada. Yeah.
Very good, very good. And maybe just to stay with you for a moment, because you mentioned homesickness in your slide just briefly, and there's 1 or 2 questions about that, just how to deal with homesickness and how long it takes to settle. So there might be some people who kind of are thinking moving abroad but concerned about this. Would you have any kind of practical tips around homesickness and kind of how long it took you to settle in places?
Yeah, it doesn't immediately come in. That's what I would say, at least from my experience. Now, obviously, it differs from person to person, but for me, the first maybe 4 to 6 months were very much like bright-eyed, I'm on an adventure type, living the experience type situation. It was after those first 6 months had passed that it started to really set in, like, oh my God, I miss certain things about home. And it's always random things, like you'll miss a certain brand of tuna, or you'll miss like a song that you might hear on the radio, or like whatever, like will trigger homesickness. And it's tough. The tips that I would have, what I did was surrounded myself with as close a group of friends as I could. And like I said in my presentation, it is difficult to make friends, and you almost have to be like a primary school level of aggressiveness in making friends, you know, like as in just be really, really enthusiastic and really, really wanting to make friends. But I think surrounding yourself with a good group of friends, especially if they themselves are going through homesickness, can really, really help. And then if you can just stay in touch with people at home, I mean, that also helps, like on Zoom or Skype, as it was when I first moved over, was very helpful. And then just know that it will pass, I think, is the other thing. Like any challenge, you know, like, or any period of difficulty, it will pass with time. So you'll feel homesick maybe for a couple of months, 3 months, and it can be bad, but it will go. It will pass, and you will be in a better, more settled place afterwards.
Very good, very good. Thank you. I think that'll be reassuring for some people. It will pass. And Ciara, to you, so lovely to hear your story, and it sounds like it took so much energy and commitment to that whole networking piece, and then, you know, dealing with 200 rejections. That's not easy, and it's honest of you to share that. But can you tell us a little bit about how you maintained that motivation and that resilience to keep going? Because it sounds like it was a real task.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I had a conversation with my dad when I was looking for roles, and he said, if you come back to Ireland, you probably won't get a role for 3 years. So that kind of gave, well, he was joking, but that kind of, well, not fully joking, but that kind of, you know, I had nothing to lose really at that point. And that was the main reason. I was still enjoying myself, having a nice time with my friends, and then just sending off applications, a couple of applications every day. So I was just doing it consistently, but I wasn't letting it take over.
Okay. So you didn't let it get in on you, broke it down and kept at it. Okay, very good.
I just kept doing it consistently whilst making sure to have a lovely time each day at the same time.
Very good. Okay, so kept some balance and it didn't overwhelm you. Okay, very good. And then Ause, maybe back to you, just in relation to the cultural competency. So somebody is, I suppose, just in terms of the research that you would do, how important do you think it is to demonstrate cultural competency at the interview stage? Is that something that you found is really important, or that people take into account that you're not local?
It does depend on the place you're applying, because if you're applying for a local company, obviously it's very important. I think, was it Ciara that said it, that told a story in a previous session? She was talking about applying in Sri Lanka and how you needed to have a picture of yourself on the CV, or they wouldn't actually accept you. So things like that are important if you're applying for a local company. In my experience, I've applied for big organizations and that kind of thing. They do make some allowances for it, but try to be, I suppose you'll need to be a little bit more culturally sensitive when you start working, especially because I had a lot of Somali and Kenyan colleagues, and kind of toning down the Irishness was important, because we tend to be quite a sarcastic bunch of people, and that doesn't always translate 100%, you know. Whereas I found that my Somali and Kenyan colleagues, they were much more sincere, and so you end up becoming more sincere. Like you feel it, and I wouldn't stress about it overly, because people do know that you're coming from abroad. But I suppose if you can be as aware of it as possible, and kind of always, actually, when you join any company, always take a listening position first. Always like sit back, kind of listen, take in the company culture, take in the culture of the place that you're at, if that's a location, and kind of then maybe after a month or so start to, you know, put yourself forward and kind of engage verbally and that kind of thing. So I think that would be my bigger piece of advice, rather than before you head out, you know, worrying about the cultural competency, unless, you know, it's something like your picture on the CV, which you'll need, which, yeah, I mean, do that research as well, just in case.
Okay, very good. And Ciara, would you have any tips on that? I know you mentioned, for example, just that the importance of doing that research, even around the recruitment timeline for you. Like Australia, it was quiet at the period you went out. but just in terms, any tips around that cultural competency? Did you find that was very important at interview stage or less?
Yeah, I think at law firms, it's important to work for partners who actually value Irish experience, because some do and some don't. And I think you can often get that information from recruiters. So at the law firm that I worked at, the head partner in the M&A group is actually from the UK. And that firm really valued Irish experience, and they tended to hire quite a few Irish lawyers. So I think it's good just to determine which companies tend to value that experience. And often the first place to get that information is through a recruiter or from people who are in the industry in the country.
Okay, very good. That's a good tip, Ciara. Thank you. And this is, maybe I'll put this to both of you. It's more a reflective question. One of our audience is just interested to know what's the biggest thing that you've learned about yourself, like from really kind of, I suppose, going outside your comfort zone, seeking work in an unfamiliar environment or a place. So maybe, Ause, would you like to ask that? What would you be kind of the most thing you've learned about yourself?
I think it's that lesson of everything is figure outable. I think just being able to, face challenges that you wouldn't have anticipated. When I was in Kenya, I was scammed out of a couple of £1,000 by my roommate, which was just this unbelievably traumatic experience, because we ended up being accosted by the landlord, and she had a militia with her, 2 guys with guns, and it was like an absolutely outrageous situation that you only hear about in movies. And myself and my partner, we had to figure out basically a way through that, and we had to figure out in very short amount of time how to deal with that situation, how to get rid of the landlady who was threatening us, and how to move out, find a new place, all in the country where we didn't really know what was going on. Like, we still hadn't settled, and we still didn't really know what was happening, and it had kind of come out of nowhere. And so I suppose the lesson is that you can be resilient, and that you'll, especially when you're forced to find your way through something, you really realize how competent you are at finding your way through anything. And I think that gave a huge boost to my confidence, and actually allowed me to grow up a little bit and take a bit of ownership of my life and the decisions that I make. So I would say that's definitely the thing that I learned, most out of being out there. Wow.
Okay. Gosh. As there's another story in that, if we had time to hear.
I did it just because of time.
Wow, that sounds an unbelievable experience. Ciara, the same question to you, I suppose. What you've learned most about yourself from your experience in moving abroad?
Yeah, for me, I never realized how incredibly helpful people would be, and how important it is to be open and vulnerable and share your experiences with people. And then you just develop really strong connections, both business and friendships. And then some of those business connections become friendships. And so that's been incredible for me. And then also so many senior people, you just reach out to them. They're more than happy to chat to you. Like, I was at an event last week, and the sponsor at the event, who's the head of a really large investment manager, joined me on LinkedIn. And then I sent him a message afterwards saying, oh, thanks for connecting. It'd be great to catch up, just to hear your perspectives. And he messaged me back straight away, and we're meeting for a coffee. And so I just think I've just really seen how open and helpful people are.
Brilliant. Okay, very good. There is one question here that's actually an interesting, that someone is wondering about. How have you ever experienced any, I suppose, well, not negativity, but where an employer has looked at kind of your career path and moving abroad, maybe as to you, like, as for example, that there was a negative thing, that you'd made lots of changes, and maybe you haven't. It's just, I suppose, someone maybe is looking at that. Would that be a barrier?
I went through a period of unemployment last year, so I did apply for a lot of things that I just didn't hear back from. So it's entirely possible. What I would say, that whenever I was in control of the narrative, it was never a negative thing. So as in, whenever I got an interview, or whenever I moved forward in an application process, you're a lot more in control of the narrative surrounding your CV than you think you are, especially at the interview stage. Because as long as you can justify everything that you've done, I suppose an employer will take that as what has happened rather than thinking that it's chaotic. And also, like I said in my presentation, I know for a fact that a lot of employers have looked at me and been like, oh, wow, you've moved here and you've moved there and you've moved there. And you have this wealth of life experience, because they're not just looking for someone who can tick the boxes necessarily, like especially as you move up the ladder. They're looking for people who are competent at facing challenges and getting through them, and you know, that confidence that I was talking about, or that willingness to do the difficult job, or you know, that those characteristics are beyond. They're sort of soft skills, if you will. They're beyond hard skills. So they're stuff that I think the employers have really looked for in me and have appreciated in me. So no, I wouldn't say at all that actually it's been a negative. I would say that it's only served to further my career and further the places that I can apply, and furthered my employability and my sort of how the impression that I give to people. Brilliant.
Very good. So, well, I hope that has kind of alleviated any, you know, if anyone had any concerns about that. Certainly it's in our experience in the Careers Network, it's very, very positive. Employers are kind of very, very positive, lots of different experiences. And it's about the soft skills, as you mentioned. So I'm very conscious of time, that we're coming up to the hour. So I'll just, Michelle may want to come back in just to kind of close, but just to say thanks to you both. Really fabulous to hear your journeys. I think the audience would have taken so much. There was just so much practical stuff in it, and it was really great. I really enjoyed that. So thank you both. Michelle, I'll hand back to you.
Thanks so much, Michelle. Guys, that was super. Thanks so much, Ause and Ciara, for those fantastic presentations. Also, Ciara, thanks a million for the chapter shout out. It's just worth saying, actually, we have chapters all over the world. So in particular, if you're planning on making the move, check out our website and just see where our locations are. And also, Ause, I feel like you have done everything and been everywhere. I'm now wondering what I've done with my life, even for all the traveling I have done. But thank you. And thanks so much to Michelle Cohen for managing our audience questions. So please remember, if you are a student or if you have graduated from UCD in the past 2 years, you can take full advantage of the event and consultant advice from the UCD Careers Network. Also, you can find today's slides in the What It Takes resource hub, and that's hosted on the UCD Alumni Network. And I think the link is going in the chat for that now. Also, please feel free to connect with Ause and Ciara on LinkedIn. And the links are being posted in the chat. And I know Ause shared his contact details at the end of his presentation. Ause, you might regret that, just saying.
Never, no, I'm always happy to
answer. So just a few final notes on upcoming alumni events before we wrap up. You might be interested in our next episode of What It Takes, which is what it takes to navigate the future of work. So this episode is also our final one of the series, and it's happening on Wednesday, the 31st of March. So you can sign up using the link that should be there in the chat. Another event that may be of interest, we have lots on at the moment, is the third episode in our Money Talk series, and that's happening this Thursday, the 18th of March at 12, so that's 12 midday. And this week's episode features mortgage specialist Owen O'Connor, and Owen will be giving us tips and advice on how to start on your mortgage journey. So I think I'll definitely be tuning into that. And then finally, nominations are open for this year's UCD Alumni Awards. These awards celebrate the achievements of 9 of our most exceptional alumni, and we invite you to submit a nomination. No doubt you guys will be on that list in the future, I imagine. So that's all from us. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you at the next session. Thank you. Bye.